Hey, you guys, how's it going? It's Wednesday, and it's time for me to cook on Facebook Live. So, wait for a couple of folks to pop in. I'm also going to try to watch today because my two daughters, are constantly like, I was on your Facebook Live and you ignored me. I can't do all these things, I can't do all this multitasking. So, let's see who jumps in here. This is a good dish today, by the way, like good stuff. I'm bringing this home. Hey, Chell. I'm bringing this one home to Greg, and he's going to be happy. He's been eating a lot of cereal and milk. All right. So, this recipe on our website says beef, and we're using ground chicken today. You can use beef, totally works. But I wanted to use ground chicken because this uh, recipe is a companion to one of our podcast episodes. So our podcast is my podcast is Smidgen. I say a lot of words. I talk with my mouth full. But we have a lot of fun on the podcast, and we always do an episode every season around chicken because it's the number one question we get. So we did this great episode, and we talked about a lot of cuts of chicken, except for ground chicken. So I was like, I'm going to convert our meatball recipe into ground chicken. It's a great, convenient protein. It's very lean and it also has a very mild flavor. So it's perfect for a recipe like this that has lots and lots and lots of components to it. But forget lots of components because you got this. I don't want anybody going, well, I don't want all these components, but totally doable, totally worth it. So these meatballs are a rough translation of kofta. And so we turned it into a smaller meatball that could be served appetizer size. It's definitely a meal. But that 1 pound of meat yields a lot. So I've got my skillet here. And so Chelsea, it's those spiced, the meatballs with the spiced tomato sauce. And you'll just sub out ground chicken. So, what's happened before you got here in this skillet? And there are steps to this recipe, but you're going to be in this one skillet the whole time. So, it's all good. So, I did some things before you got here so I could get it rolling. So, the first thing I did was I toasted coconut. So, this recipe calls for shredded coconut, and we did not have that. We have flakes. No problem. It's going to go in my food processor. I'll show you with the next step. So first, you toast coconut and don't skip that one. First of all, you need to dry the coconut out. That's one reason for toasting it, but the flavor profile is amazing. I'm talking about 4 minutes in a dry skillet, nothing to it. So you get your coconut toasted first. That's layer one. Layer two is onion and garlic sauteed in our harissa olive oil. You guys, this is all about heat, beautiful flavors of chilies, cinnamon, allspice, cardamom. It's just a flavor explosion. So I got my onions and garlic, 5 cloves of garlic. What could go wrong? 5 cloves of garlic, onion in the harissa olive oil. Sauteed that, got it really, really soft, really fragrant. And then I spread it out on a plate because I need it to cool. So it's out on a plate, cooling. So now what we're going to do is take in my food processor. I did a demo earlier today for a class, and the food processor was put together backwards, and I couldn't get it to work. And there was a man in the class, and he just stared at me like, you obviously don't know what you're doing. It was a terrible moment. I made it through. So, in this food processor is a little over a cup of salted toasted cashews. We've done other nuts, it works fine. We like the cashews the best. Salted and toasted in there. Big bunch of cilantro with the stems. Take the end of the stems off, the woody end, but the rest of the cilantro goes in. Then my coconut goes in. So I'm going to pulse that around, and look, it's going to work this time. I'm telling you, I got this thing put together properly. Okay, so it's going to, noises, sorry. Yeah, harissa and ramen. Look at this. I'm cooking, I'm reading the comments, I'm doing it all. Okay, so this is pasty, and I still see pieces of nuts in here. If your coconut is warm, or let's say you toasted your cashews because you bought raw cashews, just make sure they're cooled before you do this because you'll get yourself to some nut butter pretty quick. But it's cilantro, nuts, and coconut. And then what we're going to do is, let me get this out of the way, because then we're going to make our meatballs. So I've got my pound of ground chicken, and an egg is in here. And oops, that almost fell. And then what we're going to do is get, and look, it looks like it's going to be way too much, but just press forward. All of that goes in those meatballs. So in goes this mixture of my cashews, coconut, and cilantro. And then in goes my onions and garlic that were sauteed with the harissa olive oil. So you can reserve some chopped cashews for garnishing if you want to, or just have some extra. And you want to reserve some cilantro leaves for garnishing. Now, let me get a towel here to wipe my hands. Perfect. So let's see how I can do this so you guys can see. Let me go like this for a minute. So ground chicken is typically lean. It's typically mostly breast with a little bit of thigh. So it's a protein that can, well, it's a protein that benefits from a ton of flavor. And what you've got in here is a ton of flavor. The other cool thing about this is the texture. It's not overly coconutty, it's not overly nutty, and even cilantro. It's almost like you can't put your finger on it. I've had that a lot in classes, and when I've served this, they're like, what's going on in this meatball? They can't quite figure it out. So I love that. This is definitely a recipe. I talked about this last week about our base palette, and that we tend to skip over or substitute certain ingredients because we're like, what is that recipe writer talking about? That this recipe, right, Anne? Um, this recipe doesn't need that much coconut, but what I've found is when I've forced myself to follow recipes to the letter, I learn so much. And this is one of those recipes. So now what we want to do is we're going to get part of our spice blend in the meat mixture and part of it in the sauce. So let me get this moving quickly because it's really going to be like watching paint dry here in a second. Madras curry powder, Garam masala, all good things happened when those two got together. So ton of flavor. Madras curry is one of our, I think we have 4 curry powders, and they run the spectrum. So one is very spicy, one is very garlicky. Madras is interesting because it's more forward with citrus and cinnamon, and I love that. Okay, this smells amazing. So now let me get, I think my heat is pretty good here. So what's going to happen, I'm going to get a little more oil in here. What's going to happen is you want to form these meatballs. Look, you're going to get 24 meatballs from this. So this would be a great time to batch cook or to batch prep. So you could, let's say you don't want 24 meatballs. Let's say it's me and Greg and we want 6. So 6 times 4 is 24. I could do, um, I could freeze these meatballs at this point after I rolled them. I could freeze them and have them ready to go. So I love that this 1 pound of protein makes so many. And I'm making what I'm going to call an average garden variety meatball. You could go a lot smaller and yield a lot more, and you're going to cook faster. So we've got, let me crank my heat up underneath here because I need some sizzling to be happening. Um, Let me do that. Okay, so I'm going to keep rolling meatballs and talk to you guys. But they're beautiful. They're a really interesting color. They're a great texture, and they smell amazing, and it makes a bunch. So if you haven't found Smidgen, the great thing about it is you can jump in at any time. Any episode will give you some good info. It's not a serial podcast, so you don't have to hear what happened previously. We cover so many topics, but it's all geared toward our desire and goal, overarching goal, to make sure the home cook is successful. And so this season has been really fun and interesting. I love what the pandemic has taught us, although we're all done with the pandemic. Look how beautiful these are. And now they're sizzling away. So this has been kind of a different season for us. And um, we're loving what's coming of these conversations. The last episode of the season is going to be an interview with Galen Iverstein, who owns Iverstein Farms Butcher here in Baton Rouge. And it's going to be fun because he was my first podcast episode of season 1. So be sure you listen to that one before you tune into this one. But we just want to check in with Galen, see what's changed in his world post pandemic. I know that, like me, he was lucky enough to be very, very busy during the pandemic. So thank you guys for doing all that cooking because that helped me and my family and helped me not have to lay off any of my 11 staff members. So that was great for me. But I want to talk to Galen about what's happened because a lot did happen during the pandemic when it comes to meat supply chains. And I want to hear that from him. Okay, I'm going to wipe these hands off and I'm going to say, look what I've got left. This big skillet, this is a big stove skillet, is full. And now I am going to be able to freeze those. So I'm going to wipe my hands off. And I also think I smell my naan. Let me check on that. I'll be right back. I'm right here and I'm coming right back. Okay, this is going along beautifully. So while those are browning, and notice what I did. I'm not touching them. I'm not moving them. I'm not poking them. I'm not prodding them. I'm letting them do their thing. Yep, brown toasty naan. I'm just going to turn off the oven. Okay. So I want them to brown and I want them to stick a little bit in this skillet. I want all of that builds up in there to be stuck to the bottom because that's all going to go into my sauce. Trust me, all good stuff. Okay, so now I want to show you the other components of what's going to happen with this dish because you're going to brown. Yeah, so I serve it, so you can serve this over rice. It's fantastic over rice. A lot of times I just serve it with naan on in the bowl for getting, working with the sauce, eat the meatballs, and then get some sauce with the naan. But you could certainly serve it with rice, and I love it with a really fragrant rice like basmati. And then we carry a rice here in the shop, a fragrant Louisiana rice. That's popcorn rice. That would be great as well. Okay, let me clean up a little bit. And then we are going to move on to what happens with the sauce. So after the meatballs brown a bit. And let's just take a peek. Let's see. Yep, yep, yep. Come on now. That you need to look at. All right. So I'm going to give them a little jiggle just to make sure they're not stuck. I've got beautiful browning. I'm going to turn them. I want them to continue to brown, but the completion of the cooking, look at that one. That's my hero meatball right there. The completion of my cooking happens in the sauce. And that is as simple as 14 ounces of crushed tomatoes. The reason I mention 14 ounces is most cans of crushed tomatoes come in 28 ounces. So either double it or pop that other 14 ounces in a zip top bag or other container into your freezer to use another time. So that is something to take note of. Most of those cans of crushed tomatoes are 28 ounces. Look at that. Come on now. This is good Facebook Live stuff right now. Okay. Half of my seasonings went in my meatballs. The other half is going in my sauce. So I've got another teaspoon of curry powder and about a half a teaspoon of garam masala. And again, this is just crushed tomatoes. And I'm just going to stir that around. We just got these measuring glasses in. I'm in love with them. They're my favorite thing. Okay, that is all moved around. These are browning beautifully. And the next step is really important. So we are going to go in with our tomato sauce and coconut milk. And it's about a little over a cup. Maybe it's 3/4 of a cup. So we're going in with full fat coconut milk. Let me pop my heat down. I'll turn it off just for a second. So in goes the tomato sauce. That's a good sound. I want you to watch me do this. And in goes the coconut milk. Now, you want to start moving, nudging these meatballs around, but they're not cooked. You don't want to break them. So be gentle, but here's the cool thing. If one does break, you don't want to break them all. But if you broke one, then you would have this fun, nutty meatiness in the sauce, and that would be just fine. And there's one breaking right there, and that's okay. Just let that happen. So you get this moved around, you nudge up anything that's cooked on the bottom, any of those browned bits, and that is all goodness. So we're going to get those moved around. They are not cooked, so they've got to finish braising in this beautiful sauce. But look at that. So I'm just going to get a few of these moved around, get them nice and even, make sure they're coated on all sides, and then I'm going to leave them alone. And this sauce needs to simmer, need a lazy bubble that I always describe, and they're going to cook in the sauce, and then you're going to serve that with rice or naan. You could go over pasta if you wanted to, or just on its own. But there they are. They're beautiful, and I smell the curry, the garam masala. I can smell what those cloves are doing in that garam masala, and we want to get that all mixed around. Look how beautiful. That's a beautiful dish. And look, it's a few steps and maybe some ingredients outside of what you normally grab, but nothing crazy. No special trips to special stores. It's all things we can grab at the grocery store and put together in a different way. Certainly a different way than I've ever put together a meatball, and I just love them. So that's going to simmer away. And let me get my cilantro chopped so that I can garnish my serving. And yeah, this is delicious. So I'd love if you guys would listen to Smidgen. It's on all your podcast apps. And now I'm going to name them all. I'm joking, but you know what I'm talking about. Apple Podcast, Stitcher, let's see, Spotify, I think Pandora. Yeah, Pandora. So all those podcast apps, you know what? You can go to our website and you can click play and listen to it right there. All right, beautiful cilantro, ready to go. I didn't mention this, but there was salt, a full teaspoon of salt with the meat and the egg in the bowl that I used to make the meatballs. You do need some salt in there, even though your cashews are salted. We still found it needed some salt. And then you saw me with all the other spices. So let me get a bowl and a fork, and we are off to the races. I love this dish. We've done it for classes that were centered around cocktail hour, a class that we teach called Platters and Boards, where we teach all about cheese boards, but not just charcuterie. We teach all about platters and party food and how to plate things and things that you wouldn't think our party fare are. And the genius behind that class is, of course, Lily. I'm in the room, but she is all about those dishes. And so we've served this dish where we have it on a big platter with triangles of naan all around it, and suddenly it's an appetizer. We spear them with a toothpick, um, but I've served this just like this, where it's a Wednesday night supper. So I made some before you arrived because they need a bit to cook. I would say give them, let them cook at a really lazy bubble. The more lazy the bubble, the more tender the meatballs are going to be. So give them a good solid 20 minutes. Okay, no one wants to sit here for 20 minutes while I cook a meatball. Look at that. It's so beautiful. Okay, and look, it's thick and it's sticking to the bottom, and that's exactly what you want it to do. Oh, it's beautiful. Okay, let me get a couple of those in my bowl and then garnish that with some cilantro. And again, a nice dollop of rice right here would be lovely. That looks fantastic. If you wanted to stretch this sauce, you just add some stock and you're in great shape. But that looks delicious. And some bright, oops, you can't even see what I'm doing. Sorry. All right, there we go. Cilantro, and then naan. Let me grab a slice of naan. Toasty and brown, and put some of that next to this. And I hope you'll take a look at this recipe and give it a try, whether it's with ground chicken or beef. It's absolutely delicious. And it is something that will be really different in your weeknight rotation. And I think it's company worthy. I would definitely serve that to folks. All right. There we go. Beautiful meatballs with spiced tomato sauce. And I served it with naan and some cilantro. And if you reserve some of those cashews, that's a great thing too. But they're tender, they're beautiful, and I'm going to burn the roof of my mouth. Look at that. There I go. I'm going to take a bite. Mm. Those are amazing. I love what curry powder does for tomato sauce. And look, that was a can of crushed tomatoes. Oh, the garam masala is beautiful in there. really, really delicious. This is a lovely dish, and I hope you'll make it. I hope you'll listen to Smidgen and let me know what you think. And we will see you guys next time. Bye. Have a great day.